So Sheryl Swoopes has said quite a lot of things. About the Indiana Fever, and they've just all been wrong.
Sheryl Swoopes doesn't feel content. The Indiana Fever just executed one of the WNBA's greatest offseason transactions. They have packed their roster in the past with top talent, and it's all constructed around Caitlin Clark, but this is the location of has been getting intriguing. Swoopes, doubting Indiana in public for months, she asserted that no elite athlete would choose to. She emphasized that Clark would sign their battle. Those words have returned. In this video, we're trying to haunt her, analyzing the reasons behind Swoopes' rage and how she was proven incorrect by the Fever and what this means for the future of the NBA. Let's get into it.
Made up. Sheryl Swoopes literally made up that there was locker room drama in the Indiana Fever, and all they're talking about is the vets have said to Kelly Krauskopf, and
Sheryl Swoopes has been among the most outspoken detractors of the off-season transactions of the Indiana Fever, and following their most recent additions, she is infuriated. For months, she's been claiming Caitlin Clark would not draw the best talent that Indiana has to offer, wasn't a popular location, and that no famous person would want to perform with her. However, reality has struck hard due to the sickness simply went out and piled their lineup, including some of the top athletes in the words of the league, and now SWO feces are being employed against.
Like some of the stuff surrounding Sydney Colson. Sydney Colson's a really good locker room guy, or a locker room player. She's a fantastic locker room player, and she always is. She'll be a fan favorite in no time.
For a time, she appeared to be adamant about painting an image of the Indiana team without anyone would like to join. She stated frequently that Clark's presence wouldn't resolve, even if the Fever were still a mess, and that there would be no free agents waiting in line to perform there. But guess what? That story has been entirely. Top players have broken down one by one, devoted to creating what appears to be like a real competitor. Swoopes isn't managing it effectively. She first attempted to undermine the Fever's attempts, minimizing the significance of their acquisitions. However, when players like Diana Boner, Sydney Colson, and Natasha Howard began signing, the league took note. Not only did the Fever increase talent, but more leadership experience, a winning attitude. These weren't merely role players seeking financial compensation. These were veterans who had triumphed high-stakes championship games, and was fully aware of what was required to compete at the greatest level possible. Music, claps, and that's where things really start to get fascinating. Swoopes that claimed for months that there was no chance for Indiana to sign. She mentioned the locker room to the premier players was poisonous enough for Caitlin Clark to struggle to gain the respect of her teammates. And Indiana was just not a destination franchise. But if you look at what truly transpired, it's entirely different from how the Fever developed their group surrounding Clark and making it obvious that they wish to win. Therefore, let's have a conversation for a moment about Diana Boner. She is not only a skilled athlete, but also one of the most esteemed veterans in the. She has advanced to the WNBA finals and won titles, and she is fully aware of them. Travels there and signs with the Fever was about more than just money, about having faith in what they are creating. And it's quite telling, because when a experienced person like Boner recognizes potential in a team, it indicates that something genuine is occurring. Followed by Tasha Howard. She adds yet another enormous addition: superior defensive rebounding skills and the capacity to. She fits the floor wonderfully to extend it, given the Fever's desire to play, and she's played for and understands how to win championship teams, and she is aware of the type of work and mindset necessary to contend for a championship. And not to be overlooked is Sydney Colson, who may not be a household name in terms of statistics, but her influence extends beyond the numbers. She is a defensive leader, expert, and among the greatest lockers presences in the league as a whole when a team seeks to develop a player's culture. As like Carlson is the ideal candidate for you, and Indiana now has all of these components in place, together flawlessly, but what actually? This is stinging for Swoopes. Totally ruins everything she's been stating that she made a great effort to push. The notion that Caitlin Clark has not ability to draw in elite athletes that she'd struggle to win her trust. Teammates as well as the Fevers continue to be a low-level franchise in. Rather, they're becoming one of the most hazardous groups in the WNBA, and everyone is paying attention, including Clark has been outspoken about how she is thrilled to play with these. She has discussed with Warriors how much she appreciates their encounter to the extent that she's eager to absorb their knowledge, as well as how she thinks this group has all it requires to compete at a high level. And, to be honest, this type of building a roster is not something that just happens by accident. In the front office of the Fever had a well-defined plan and carried it out perfectly. Isn't only about obtaining. It's important for good players to get with the correct players. The Fever might have subsided following younger, untested talent, but rather they prioritized experience. They desired defense and leadership. Athletes who could assist Clark in acclimating to, who could mentor the young corp in the WNBA, and who was able to cope with the pressure of playing for a rival squad. And they nailed it. The fans' response has. Fever fans are excited, and it's been amazing. Reasonably enough, this isn't simply no longer about Caitlin Clark. This is about assembling a winning team, titles, and the reality that these senior athletes choose to participate in. Indiana radically changes the course of events. All of the remarks made regarding the team, but we must not overlook those who are unhappy. In particular, Sheryl leaps in, since she isn't just. She is angry, furious, and outspoken regarding her feelings regarding the Fevers moves, and it's obvious that she's having trouble. Acknowledge that she was entirely mistaken. Attempted to damage Indiana's standing. However, the players themselves shown her incorrect, and that's what's actually motivating her response, since at the conclusion of the media is not listened to by day players. Stories they share with one another, they understand their desired destination based on actual encounters more than what someone on the outside is saying. And the phrase at the moment, throughout the league, Indiana is creating something unique. So where does she could admit that this leaves Swoopes? Well, she was incorrect to admit that Indiana did in fact draw top talent, and rather than giving credit where credit is due, she continues to push while doubling down the Fever's belief that they are not candidates, that they're exaggerating their signings, and the fact that this club will fail as expected. Although at this time, it's becoming increasingly difficult to handle taking her seriously, as the truth is, evidently, the Fever is real. They've constructed a competitive roster. Their staff was loaded with expertise, and Caitlin Clark has been encircled with the top players who could assist her achieve. And if the initial responses from, according to WNBA analysts, the team is going to surprise a lot of people. Even if the season hasn't begun yet, one thing is certain: Indiana is on its way, and they're approaching quickly. They're not simply. They're attempting to be competitive, must win everything, regardless of how much some may attempt to minimize it. The reality is directly in front of us. Fever is not simply returning. It might be more powerful than before, and the remainder of the league now has no option but to listen, since with the skill set they have gathered, they're developing chemistry, and the Indiana Fever has gaining momentum, is no longer only another team. They're a real danger. And for Sheryl, the one thing she never does is want to acknowledge Indiana Fevers. Switching to a powerhouse isn't. It's not just about stacking talent. altering the story for years. This was a group having trouble figuring out its determine who they were at the base of the league's efforts to rebuild, yet fall short. The components to actually compete in a little period of time, they have transitioned from being disregarded in favor of being one of the most discussed teams in the WNBA, which is why this narrative has gotten so divisive that Sheryl leaps to those who had doubts about Indiana are observing. This all develops with a combination of they spent time in shock and frustration, claiming for months that no stars would join the team with Caitlin Clark wasn't a desirable location and believed the Fever's failure was inevitable. But one by one, reality has shown otherwise. Veteran athletes have decided to participate in this undertaking, and that entirely takes everything apart. Swoopes has been announcing Dananna Boner's arrival is especially noteworthy. She's a multiple All-Star, a successful athlete, and a well-respected league veteran. Choice to join Indiana makes a big impression. This team's message is for real. Choices she may have remained in her, felt at ease, or sought a championship. Instead, she noticed something in this team is currently in the city. That says a lot. And then Natasha, another veteran, Howard, has been through lengthy playoff runs and is aware of what is required to win. Her over strengthens the defense of Indiana is something they much required, but more crucially, she contributes an attitude, that championship mentality capable of elevating a whole team. These are not your typical free agents. These signings are revolutionary, and that's precisely what Swoopes is consuming, and others who have expressed disapproval of the rising of Indiana, because this isn't only teamwork is more important than individual talent. Constructing the front office for the Fever didn't simply toss money at players at random. They carefully crafted a roster that enhances Caitlin Clark's abilities and makes the most of their strengths. Young core is the type of intelligent, thoughtful choice-making that transforms turning an underperforming team into a potential contender. However, in spite of all of these swoops, she's still attempting to double down, make folks believe that Indiana is in a grave danger, but that contention it's becoming more difficult to defend. Fans observing reality as it develops in real time. Talent isn't the only thing the Fever is gathering. Just for fun, they're creating a winning culture, are positioning themselves for sustained. One of the main criticisms of success, what Swoopes has promoted, is Caitlin Clark would not be capable of managing a group at the professional level, yet that assertion is already beginning to disintegrate. The way she has been mentioned by her new comrades, the regard people have given her, they are excited to play with her, conveys a new narrative that Clark isn't entering a changing area filled with she is stepping out of division or animosity into a setting where her teammates have faith in her, which is what makes this is really annoying for folks due to the fact that the Indiana Fever are demonstrating that everything she stated was incorrect. In addition to bringing in elite athletes, but those athletes they are thrilled to be there and witness the potential. They recognize the chance and they see a way to succeed. And there's more going on here. Swoopes has been a legendary figure in the WNBA, was a pioneer that influenced basketball for women. Yet recently, her remarks have resembled an attempt to rip down the largest rising star in the league, instead of improving the game, which is why her response to the success of Indiana feels so telling rather than joyous. The expansion of a franchise in which she acts as though the loss is personal. And let's not disregard the fact that other WNBA veterans are addressing this, as Swoopes has been. She has been loud in her criticism, and there are many other legends who have adopted they observe the rise in Fever for what it truly is, a watershed. More people watching the WNBA. Greater competition means greater excitement, beneficial for the game, but for individuals who were wishing for Indiana to fail is a terrible situation since it's evidently the Fever are more than just a fun narrative. They're a real force that everything is in place and the momentum is there, and the participants think that's the recipe for a unique swoop is. In some ways, frustration is understandable. She devoted a lot of time on pushing a story that has now been fully disassembled, and now her sole move is to continue to fight the truth. But it won't alter Indiana's current situation. They're actually building something here, and the remaining league members are formally on notice. So let's discuss what's the updated roster for the Fever isn't regarding this forthcoming season, it's regarding long-term success. They have a combination of leadership among youth and veterans that prepares them for future years. Caitlin Clark is just starting out in her Aaliyah Boston's career is still growing, and they already possess the ideal mentors available to assist them in developing. This is why the front office of the Fever deserves so much credit that they didn't merely construct a overnight. The competitive team created a both in the WNBA and the foundation where dynasties have a rapid rise and fall. The secret to remaining at the top is that they made mistakes instead of taking shortcuts, clever deliberate actions, and now we're observing the outcome of such effort. However, the truth is that the Fever isn't completed. They've already created a stir with their movements throughout the offseason, but this is only the start as Clark keeps